Story 1. Return to horror midnight mayhem on the Hudson River. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve, a sense of foreboding washed over me. I found myself standing alone on the desolate docks of the Hudson River, waiting for the last ferry of the night. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of water lapping against the pier. I had heard whispers of a tragic incident that had occurred on this very ferry years ago, a tale of horror that had been buried in the depths of the river. Despite the warnings, I felt drawn to the ferry, compelled to uncover the truth behind the rumors that haunted these waters. The ferry appeared out of the darkness, its rusty hull creaking as it docked with a ghostly groan. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, before stepping aboard. The interior was dimly lit, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the flickering light. I took a seat near the bow of the ferry, the only passenger on board. As we set off into the inky blackness of the river, a sense of unease settled over me. The water seemed to whisper secrets of the past, of lives lost and souls trapped in eternal torment. Suddenly, a thick fog rolled in, obscuring my vision and enveloping the ferry in a shroud of darkness. Panic gripped me as I realized we were adrift, lost in the swirling mists with no land in sight. The ferry creaked and groaned, as if straining against unseen forces that sought to drag us down into the depths below. I stumbled to my feet, desperate to escape this nightmare come to life. But as I made my way to the deck, a figure emerged from the shadows, its face twisted in a grotesque mask of agony. It reached out to me with spectral hands, its touch like ice against my skin. In a blind panic, I fled towards the bow of the ferry, the figure pursuing me with relentless determination. As I reached the edge, I turned to face my tormentor, only to find myself staring into the empty void of the river below. With a final, desperate cry, I leaped into the icy waters, the darkness swallowing me whole. And as I sank into the depths, I heard a voice whispering in the darkness, a voice filled with sorrow and regret. The ferry sailed on, disappearing into the night, leaving behind only ripples on the surface of the Hudson River. Final moral: some tragedies are best left undisturbed, for the past has a way of resurfacing when least expected. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 2. Fatalities in Seattle New Year's Ferry Disaster. As the clock struck midnight on New Year's Eve in Seattle, a sense of excitement filled the air. The city was alive with celebrations, fireworks lighting up the sky, and people eagerly awaiting the promise of a new year. However, amidst the joy and revelry, a dark shadow loomed over the waters of Puget Sound. I found myself on board the Seattle-Newcastle ferry that fateful night, a last-minute decision to take a late-night ride across the Sound. The ferry was packed with passengers, all in high spirits, their laughter and chatter echoing through the night. But as we set sail into the darkness, a feeling of unease crept over me. The waters were choppy, the wind howling ominously as the ferry cut through the waves. I made my way to the upper deck, drawn by an inexplicable urge to gaze out into the black expanse of the Sound. The city lights of Seattle twinkled in the distance, a beacon of civilization in the vast darkness. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the ferry, causing screams of terror to erupt from the passengers. I rushed to the railing, my heart pounding in my chest, only to see a sight that would haunt me forever. A massive cargo ship had collided with the ferry, its hull tearing through the side of the vessel like a knife through butter. Panic ensued as the ferry began to sink rapidly, the icy waters of Puget Sound rushing in to claim the doomed vessel. Passengers scrambled in desperation, some leaping overboard in a futile attempt to swim to safety. The screams of the injured mingled with the sound of rushing water, creating a cacophony of terror. I found myself trapped on the sinking ferry, the frigid waters rising around me. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I knew that my only chance of survival lay in swimming for shore. With a deep breath, I plunged into the icy depths, the cold searing through my body like 1,000 needles. The swim to shore felt like an eternity, each stroke a battle against the relentless pull of the current. As I finally reached the safety of land, gasping for breath and shivering uncontrollably, I turned back to see the ferry disappear beneath the waves, a tomb for those who had perished in the New Year's tragedy. In the aftermath of the disaster, the city of Seattle mourned the loss of those who had been on board the ill-fated ferry. Investigations revealed a series of errors and miscommunications that had led to the collision, but for me, the horror of that night would never fade. The memory of the sinking ferry and the screams of the doomed passengers would forever haunt my dreams, a reminder of the fragility of life and the merciless power of the sea. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 3. Tragic Accident at Carnival Plaza. The night was thick with anticipation as I made my way through the bustling crowds at Carnival Plaza. The air was heavy with the scent of fried food and cheap perfume, the neon lights casting eerie shadows on the pavement. As I weaved through the throngs of revelers, a sense of unease crept over me, like a cold hand gripping my heart. I found myself drawn to a dilapidated carousel at the edge of the plaza, its once vibrant colors faded and peeling. The music that played from its speakers was distorted and discordant, sending shivers down my spine. Despite the warning bells ringing in my mind, I stepped onto one of the creaking wooden horses and felt the carousel lurch into motion. As the world spun around me, I caught glimpses of the other riders, their faces twisted in agony and fear. Their eyes bore into mine, accusing and pleading all at once. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. The music grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, and I felt myself being pulled deeper into the nightmare. Suddenly, the carousel screeched to a halt, throwing me to the ground with a sickening thud. I looked up to see a figure standing before me, cloaked in shadows and emanating a palpable sense of malevolence. It beckoned me closer, and I felt myself compelled to obey, my limbs moving of their own accord. As I drew near, the figure whispered in a voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind, telling me of the tragedy that had befallen Carnival Plaza on a New Year's Eve long ago. A ferry carrying revelers had capsized in the dead of night, sending scores of innocent souls to a watery grave. The figure spoke of the survivors, haunted by guilt and grief, their minds fractured by the horrors they had witnessed. I tried to turn away, to flee from this waking nightmare, but I was rooted to the spot, my fate sealed by forces beyond my comprehension. The figure reached out a hand, its touch like ice against my skin, and I felt a searing pain lancing through my body. Darkness closed in around me, and I knew no more. When I awoke, I found myself lying on the cold pavement of Carnival Plaza, the carousel looming over me like a malevolent specter. The crowds had dispersed, leaving me alone in the eerie silence of the night. As I stumbled to my feet, a sense of profound loss washed over me, as if a part of my soul had been torn away. I fled from the plaza, the echoes of the tragedy ringing in my ears, knowing that I would never truly escape its grasp. The specter of that fateful New Year's Eve would haunt me forever, a reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurks within us all. Anonymous spectator story. Final satisfatório.